I've covered a few weapons that have potential to win a major in this series. Some that have actually done it, like S-Blast and Dually Squelcher, others that have some progress, like Dreadringer and Nautilus, but there's one option that's less proven than all of those. One that I still think has some potential, and that is H3. I don't think there's been any weapon in the Splatoon series that's jumped between having a horrible reputation and a good reputation as much as this one. When it started in Splatoon 1, this was seen as a weapon that just wasn't worth it. You had to hit a burst of shots in order to get a reliable kill, and it was just so slow. How could it possibly thrive, is what everyone asked, until Cherry H3 came out, which gave it the clear proper tools it needed, proper stability and HP. With Wall and Bubbler, it was able to thrive and absolutely take over Splatoon 1. Nintendo took notice and promptly gutted it, as with a lot of top tiers going into Splatoon 2. But H3 got to recover. They realized it, and they buffed it back. And once again, it got a kit with some good stability, Suction Bomb, and Ink Armor. But it also had MPU damage up, which helped it thrive, until they over-nerfed it again. Then the weapon got put in Splatoon 3. With a faster paced game and a kit that didn't really provide stability, H3 just wasn't really seen as that good an option. But then, when all hope seemed lost, H3D came out. Splash Wall and Big Bubbler. It's the returning kit of the devastating Cherry H3 that dominated Splatoon 1, but nothing happened upon its release. It didn't really see use in any tournaments, and it was seen as a lot weaker. Well, maybe that could just be the specials balance. Bubbler was the best special in Splatoon 1, and Big Bubbler was quite far from that back then. But now, let's fast forward to today. H3 has gotten some notable buffs, including toning back its ink efficiency problem a little bit and helping with its damage to make it more consistent. But most notable, Big Bubbler has gone buffed into a top 5 special, being one of the best stability tools in the game. And despite all of that, almost nothing's happened with H3. The only thing that we've seen in terms of higher level play for this weapon is one area cup run, where an H3 managed to get 3rd place. But that's it. It's not prominent in discussion at all. It only has been seen as decent more recently, and it's got one tournament run to its name. That's worse than anything else we've covered in this series. So what's going on here? Is H3 somehow still falling behind its older self? Or is there potential for this weapon that's just untapped? Let's take a closer look. So I think the first factor to talk about is the lack of damage up. So while H3 has always been a naturally difficult weapon, Splatoon 1 and 2 have both worked around it by having some form of damage up. This means that 2 shots from the weapon can kill a weakened opponent, and it's generally a little bit easier to get picks. That's one thing you don't have in Splatoon 3. While the weapon does have a better base damage than it did in the previous games, it's still not going to easily pick off most weakened targets, which, to be fair, I think is a good thing. Most people didn't like damage up and MPU damage up because it felt unfair to die to 1 fewer shots, but it is a thing that hurts this weapon when looking back at previous ones, since it makes it a lot less consistent. And it's also been a point of discussion as something that should maybe be changed with the weapon. Mainly, should it be a little bit faster instead to compensate, which I think would be a cool idea. But in this case, it's a point against the weapon. Another difference compared to it and the old H3 is the ink efficiency. At the very end of Splatoon 2, as a compensation for MPU damage up, H3 got a harsh ink consumption nerf. This especially hurt its paint output and uptime. It makes it tricky to get a lot of shots after throwing a splash wall if you're playing for the stability, and if you're painting in general, you're gonna have to spend a lot more time recovering your ink. This means that getting your next special weapon is going to take a good bit of time, even though the Big Bubbler on it isn't necessarily expensive by any means. And I think that's a big downside for a support that's relying so heavily on that special to be aggressive. The third point that we could talk about as a difference here is the special itself. While H3 wasn't exactly good at walking forward with Bubbler by any means, it was definitely easier than Big Bubbler, which locks in your current position, let alone the fact that Bubbler made you completely invincible while you can run inside a Big Bubbler. Wall does serve to compensate a little bit by having a second additional barrier you could put up, but it's definitely not the same as options like Roller and Decab that have a very reliable way to kill people who walk in their bubble. Despite that, I don't think H3 is bad with Bubble by any means. If anything, I think H3 being a stable tank is something it's very good at. Compared to Squeezer, it has a lot more paint output, and compared with 96, it's able to keep the main weapon and its paint output active rather than worrying about the downsides of turning into a Kraken. This means that I think H3 does still have a stable identity that doesn't overlap with other weapons. However, it's clear from the things that I went over that its power level isn't quite at the point as it used to be in previous games, and that makes it very tricky for the weapon to keep up with. But there's another factor that a lot of people are going to talk about, which is the speed of the game. Splatoon 3 is a very fast-paced game. You could argue it might not feel that different compared to Splatoon 1, but I'd argue it definitely feels that way with the skill level that the scene is at. Splatoon 1 was the first game that happened, and people were never really able to optimize it as well as we've been with the third game, so many years later. This means that the skill level and pacing of our best teams is much higher than it was back then, and H3 is being challenged a lot better than it used to be before, paired with all the other problems it has, and that seems to be the reason it's mostly fallen apart. And that makes it tough to have faith in it winning a big tournament, because paired with all of these, it's of course a very difficult weapon. Hitting one taps of multiple shots in a single burst is really tricky. Even if you have other players helping to combo with you, that's tough to work around. While H3 does provide some team support with its bubble, it doesn't really have as much to benefit other players as other traditional supports. This makes it tricky to replace the short-range shooter on the team or replace the main slaying weapon that you could run. That's a lot of problems at the same time. Despite having a good kit and being on the way to being a better weapon, I think that H3 is just suffering from a lot of different problems at the same time. There's just so many different issues that it has to deal with, and while at this point none are major problems on their own, all of them put together seem to be too much. Hold on everybody, breaking news! Since the creation of this script, a brand new H3 has dropped with Suction Bomb and Triple Ink Stripe. How does this change things? Well, this new H3 kit much more cleanly slots into a support role, with a more powerful option than the H3D. However, by comparison, this one has no tools to make up for its slow speed and precise one-shot like its previous kit attempts to, which means that you're going to be more susceptible to being rushed down and having to hit your shots than before. However, this is still definitely a step up from the previous one. It also has utility over the comparable weapon of Neo Splash. While the kits are the same, H3 is a mid-range weapon that wants to fight a little bit more, while Neo Splash really just wants to paintbot as much as possible and plays around its mobility. Overall though, this means it could be more worth the difficulty curve for the new H3, and it's less susceptible to counter picks. Despite that, as of right now, if there aren't any further changes to the weapon, I don't think H3 can win a major, but hopefully we'll see that change. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see y'all next time.